talk about the long road back to government, we're joined now by three of the finest backbenchers in the Labour Party ranks. Clive Lewis, Caroline Flint and Lisa Nandy. I'm on your Christmas card list now, I'm sure. Clive, let's start with you, shall we? Party unity is clearly going to be a topic, is always a topic when it comes to this particular political movement. How unified behind the leader is the Labour Party at the moment?
I'd say most of the members are, obviously, the vast majority of them. I think in the PLP it's probably a little shakier. And I think you have to understand why. We've just been through a kind of quite bruising 2 years, and politics is going through vast changes. You know, the country's going through vast changes, the world's going through vast changes, and there is a transition taking place. It's a wobbly one, it's shaky, and it's been quite bruising. But I think what this conference is about is drawing a line underneath that and saying we're a party, a government in waiting, and how do we now begin to define what is the future and the offer that we're going to put out there to people for the challenges of the 21st century.
I mean, what are the risks, Caroline, if that line is not drawn underneath, underscored, highlighted and then repeated?
I think what is clear since the general election earlier this year is that Jeremy actually ran a very good campaign. I think he capitalised on a disastrous campaign and lead by Theresa May. And for all intents and purposes, Jeremy is our leader and will continue to be our leader, I think, into the next general election. What we have to show is that despite the wins that we won in 2017, we didn't win the election. We haven't won an election since 2005. So we have to show that and prove that we are a government in waiting. And to do that, we have to make sure that we are in touch on things like Brexit, but also we're looking beyond that to the other policies that actually people want to hear about and talk about that affect their families and future. And I think, you know, a number of the different discussions this week, it's going to be about Brexit, but there's a whole load of other areas on education and health that we need to talk about too.
We'll move on to policy in a couple of minutes, but Lisa and Andy, I suppose the question is exactly how that unity within the party is brought about, be it by changes to the rule book or by permitting those dissenting voices to exist within the broad church of the party.
Yeah, I mean, we've always been a broad church, and I think we've been at our best.
Slightly narrower these days?
When we are, well, I don't know really. I mean, you were quite narrow under Tony Blair. You only had a very narrow range of voices at the top of the party, but then you did have people like Jeremy Corbyn on the backbenches providing a challenge. And I think actually the Labour Party is stronger for that because it means that we represent a much broader spread of opinion within the party. I suppose I'm a bit more optimistic than Clive, though. I feel like the election really did settle the question of leadership, not just within the membership, but within the PLP. And the reason that it did that is because we all had the experience of going out knocking on doors day after day, new members and old, alongside members of Parliament. We got to know one another as what is essentially a new party. And I think it's built a level of trust that will take us forward and reminded us crucially of what happens when we start focusing on the issues that matter to the people and not just the issues that matter to us. And that's the challenge for this conference and going forward, is not to descend into infighting or start trying to reopen tired questions of leadership or rule changes, but to start thinking about...
You say descend into. I mean, you're already there. I mean, the NEC meeting, you had a Corbyn supporter saying, there are Labour MPs who deserve to be attacked. There are MPs up and down the country. You're hearing murmurs from the CLP about deselection.
Yes.
That doesn't scream unity to me.
I don't accept that because, I've read the newspapers this morning. I've seen absolute nonsense written about a number of people, including myself, about things that we're supposedly saying and doing. But when I get here, the mood is very positive. The people I meet from a broad spread of the party are very supportive and positive and very focused on what we can do to get the Tories out. We're neck and neck in the polls with the Tories. We've got a mountain to climb, there's no question about it. But the idea that any of us should be talking about infighting or what's happening within the Labour Party at the moment seems to me astonishing.
I think a lot of the discussion about deselections by a relatively few number of voices is overblown, and I understand why the media want to seize on every time someone makes a comment like that, or even that a leadership bid. I think actually in terms of what the rule changes are happening this week on the threshold for nominations and what have you, if that's going to happen, that's going to happen. What I would say, and this is my personal view, is I do think as a party we should recognise the importance of the different constituent parts, the trade union movement, the PLP, members, but I also actually feel that full members should have more of a say in the leadership of a leader to the party than those who register for a £3, £5 or whatever.
Clive, what do you then see as the role of the PLP moving forward? As I said in my introduction, perhaps I hammed it up a little bit. We've got three of the most talented people within the Labour Party sitting on the backbenches at the moment. So what is the role of the PLP to get yourselves into number 10?
I think the role of the PLP, I think it's all... The PLP has historically played a role where, in terms of a parliamentary route to a Labour government, has had them at the vanguard of that. And that's not changed. It's still the same. But I think what has happened is that the party has shifted. We now have one of the largest social democratic parties in the Western world, and I think the rule changes are to reflect those changes and to reflect a kind of growing demand for democracy within, I think, our party and our society at large. The role for the PLP would always be one of partly leadership, but partly, I think, what it does in Parliament to kind of drive forward that policy agenda that is democratically decided by the whole of the Labour Party, the Labour movement, the trade union movement, the membership, and the PLP has a role to play in that. So I don't think we're kind of being pushed out of the way. It's just a rearrangement of how things operate and the influence that different sections of the Labour Party have, and I think that's quite clear.
I think members of Parliament have an additional role, because at the end of the day we are elected by voters who come from all sorts of backgrounds, and for me, as someone who has been a party member since 1979, a very long time, and seen a few things in those decades, our party has to avoid just focusing internally on what's going on inside and look outwards. And there is a lesson for us from every election. One of the things about Tony Blair is the fact is we won elections because we had a broad appeal across the country. So when you talk about a broad church in the Labour Party, it's about how do we make sure we have that broad church of support across the country as well. And MPs have an important role in that, because we have to go out there and listen to our constituents, act on behalf of our constituents, whether they vote Labour or Tory or Green or anything else, and represent as best we can those views. And that is a very important aspect of what we offer and give to the party.
I mean, Lisa, do you think on the kind of the biggest political issue of the day, on Brexit, do you feel that there is sufficient distance between the party position and the government position right now?
Well, I feel like we're leading the government position, actually, and that's probably the best place of all to be. I mean, I actually feel very optimistic about where we are on Brexit. There is a very live debate within the Labour Party that reflects the debate that has happened within the country. We represent both heavily Leave and heavily Remain constituencies, and so if we can get this right in Labour, we can get the right offer for the country. And actually this transitional deal that Keir Starmer set out a few weeks ago that Theresa May has now agreed to seems to me exactly right. You protect jobs, you have no cliff edge, you take time to work through and think through the compromises
you just push it back by 2 years.
Well, not necessarily.
We're leaving, aren't we? So if that's the cliff edge, we are leaving.
But that doesn't have to mean that you throw jobs, workers' rights, environmental protections off the edge of that cliff, not to mention the border with Northern Ireland. And we do need time to get that right. And actually, a number of my colleagues, Clive included, signed a letter to the Observer this morning that said that we should be looking to remain in the single market for the foreseeable future permanently. Now, I don't happen to agree with Clive about that, about setting out that we have that red line above all else at this stage in the negotiations. But it doesn't mean that I disagree with him ideologically on the point about protecting jobs. The question is just how best we do that.
Following on from our discussion about unity and kind of bringing everyone together, I mean, how do you square that circle that you've got at least a third of party members who would, frankly, probably at the very least be dissatisfied with continued membership of the single market, if not absolutely livid about it?
Yeah. It's a difficult issue, and I think what you have to understand is that we're a democratic party, and democracy is a flexible, moving, living entity, and there is always going to be debate on issues, on major issues, and Europe is the most major issue of all in my living memory for me. So I see no contradiction between being a unified party working together for government, but also being able to have the debate and move the position. You think about the country; it's moved since the Brexit vote. Mm-hmm. We've had the general election since. It's moved, and some part, I think it has. And I think what the Labour Party is doing, and this is why I'm in agreement with the front bench, although I'd like to see it go further, and I think it's partly my job and the job of members and those who want to see us to have the strongest possible relationship with Europe, to keep pushing that boundary. And I think Labour is moving with public opinion. But there's nothing wrong with people inside the party pushing Labour to keep moving that debate forward.
I think, to be honest, Clive and other colleagues should be more honest. When they talk about the campaign for the single market, and that's full membership of the single market, you cannot leave the European Union and be a member of the single market and the customs union. That's You just can't do that. So they'd be more honest if they just said campaign to not leave the European Union. And of course there is a party that is supporting that. It's called the Liberals. There has to be an honesty about this. I am entirely at one with Labour's front bench in the recognition that we are leaving the European Union, that there will have to be transition plans, I was saying that a year ago, and also that we will have as much access to the single market as we can and the customs union, but there has to be change to freedom of movement. And I'm afraid the 30-odd people who signed the letter seem to be in denial about that. And I think they should be more upfront and honest, which I think is a principled position, which is a campaign to stop us leaving the European Union.
Lisa, any thoughts?
Well, having said that we're completely united.
Well, it's true. It's true.
Okay.
This is true.
Here's where I agree with Caroline. I agree absolutely that we've got the position right within the Labour Party, that we accept the result of the referendum, despite the fact that the vast majority of us didn't want it, and that now our job is to get the best possible deal that we can. But to be honest, I think that most of the people who signed that letter, Clive included, hold that position. We campaigned very hard to stay in the EU. We lost that. And now we've got to work out how we get the best future for Britain. And this is a question of strategy, not of ideology.
The single market and not leave the European Union.
Well, we don't know. That's the honest answer. But that is the honest answer. This is a negotiation.
This is an unprecedented situation.
But you don't want to accept changes to freedom of movement, do you?
No, and I tell you, we want to go.
So therefore, you do not respect the vote.
But the letter does. The letter absolutely does. It says that we should work with European colleagues.
Seriously.
I just want to make another point. On occasion, sometimes it appears that the Labour Party is divided and that you don't take advantage of clear attack lines given by the Conservatives.
Never.
Would you agree?
No, not at all. Well, maybe some of the. But I think on the issue
Isn't the simple fact, Clive, that at some point the party is going to have to bite the bullet? It's going to have to be absolutely crystal clear about what its position is, not just for the transition period, but what happens after that point.
Yes, indeed, it will. And the issue of freedom of movement, on which Caroline and myself have vast differences of opinion.
Well, what's our vast difference of opinion?
I actually believe in the freedom of movement.
Right, so you don't think we should manage migration
Surely you
at
can
all?
agree about whether you disagree.
No,
with
you
Europe,
don't
we
think
have,
we should
with,
have
Europe, with Europe, we have the freedom of movement,
you
and it's
don't
about.
think-
You want.
So you don't go against-
you're talking about when you're talking about managing migration,
which is what Diana
which
supports.
always
That's
comes
what Diana
back down to.
supports.
Ultimately, always comes back down to, and you're not gonna like to hear this, but it always comes back down to something the left in this country has had very much difficulty with, which is that it is ultimately about racism.
No,
That's what it comes down to. It comes down to racism.
No, it's not.
Yes, it does. And I'm afraid to say,
Keir Starmer's been pretty clear about this, that he wants to see controls on immigration. Yeah, indeed.
This is not about this is managed migration with the rest of the world, yes, but with the European Union, this is a retrograde step with
Diana said she recognises, and Jeremy has said, and I'm absolutely at one with them on this, that there has to be some recognition that there needs to be some changes to the way we handle movement from the EU.
And you can do that within the European Union because the European Union is already discussing this.
No, because the thing is, Clive, what you seem to not accept is people do not want to have our migration settled by 27 other member states. They want us to be able to have the right to decide that.
Okay, so let me just, this is a very important point.
You don't want any controls on immigration, clearly. You don't want any controls.
You want to take back the flawed democracy from Europe and hand it over in a trade deal to Trump and the corporates on their immigration policy.
I think you're shifting it.
I'm not, because sovereignty isn't something that you
don't want any
like
immigration controls
No,
at all.
I do want immigration controls.
But
I want
not
freedom
in
of movement within Europe.
I think it is fair to say that there is a conversation that will continue within the Labour movement. Lisa Nandy, Caroline Flint, Clive Lewis, thank you all very much for being with us.